Tell me a little bit of the concept of open source cinema.
Well, the concept is to create a collaborative documentary about copyright, so that we're allowing the audience to take part in the creation of the film by submitting their own footage and by remixing footage that we've put up on the site for free under Creative Commons license. So it's really to try and get the audience involved in the making of a film that really at its core is really dealing with that shift between producers and consumers, and how that line is beginning to blur. Everybody is becoming a creator now.
And what's the incentive for people to get involved, right? It's not a financial incentive of we'll pay you money, you'll have a share of the movie.
Well, I think the incentive is for creators, that they can have some input into a really important topic, and that they can have their work seen. It's really the same impetus that anyone would post a video to YouTube, or would share a video. Which, when we first began the project, we would get a lot of people saying, "Well, why would anybody just make a video and post it for free on YouTube? It's ridiculous." But that we've seen that this is actually something it's an activity that people want to do. It's for the love of it. It's like Lawrence Lessig describes this as amateur culture, not amateurs in poor, but they love to do this. And I think that's the incentive. And you also get the incentive that a lot of people will think I'm wrong, and they want to correct me, or that they think that they feel very strongly about this issue, and that they want to add their perspective to it. So I think that's the financial. But we have provided some financial incentive, like a little bit, to try and get people involved. We've run things like contests. We had a contest around Girl Talk, who was one of the main characters in the film, to see who could create the best remix. We offered like a little bit to do that experiment, to see if it would help. But I think most of the stuff that we've seen has been people are uploading it and creating it just because they want to.
What about the issues of control? Like when you talk about submitting interviews to a documentary, when you talk about editing a documentary, traditional documentary filmmakers might feel like there's a surrender of control. Like, I want this documentary to be about my vision, my perspective.
There is a surrender of control. It's funny because I was just recently doing some editing about because there's a chapter in the film that's about Napster. And it was really funny. It was this interview with Lars Ulrich from Metallica, and he said control in the interview about like 50 times. It's not about money, it's about control. People don't understand. This is about our control over our work. It's about control.
Well, creative people like...
Creative people do like... Yeah, we're fascists, aren't we, as artists. But I think that... so there's a couple of things. Yes, there will be that level of control for me as the filmmaker, that I have to put an end to it at some point and say this is the definitive version of this film, because otherwise, it won't get into the theaters and get on television and get out there as I want. So I have to act in the same way that an open source software project has what they call like a benevolent dictator. I have to act in that way. I have to exercise my discretion about what I think is quality or not quality. But having said that, in the terms of how I've released my own footage, that doesn't stop anybody else from making their own version of the film if they want to. So it's sort of a give and take. I, as the creator, have given up my control of my footage, and in turn I'm asking for you to give up a bit of your control. And that's what we kind of have to do as artists if we want to get over this kind of hump that we're at right now with, how do we make money online? How do we prevent our work from being pirated? How do we do all of these things? On some levels, it's about giving up a little bit of that control.
What about the aspect, so you're going to have people help you edit the movie, people are going to supply footage that might wind up in the movie, people are doing research for you, right, on this wiki, sort of providing incidents and facts that maybe should be in the movie. Do you also imagine that people will help promote the movie once it's finished in kind of an open source way?
Absolutely. That's been definitely the best thing that could have happened for me right now, is that I was giving away all this footage, because people were able to write about it on their blog, people were able to link to it, and that really helped push the page up into like Google rankings, Technorati, things like that. People want to know. I'm not the first person to maybe one of the first people to think about doing this, but certainly not the last to think about making an open source film. So if people Google open source film, they're gonna find their way to me, and then they're gonna decide, oh, this is cool, I want to take part in this. So it really works that way, having bloggers and other people writing about your work and promoting it.
But it's funny because I feel like I've talked to a lot of filmmakers who don't like the idea of releasing any footage from their movie until it's time, quote unquote, time to promote it.
Yeah, and I think there could be some truth to that, but I don't. I like to live in the kind of always beta phase of my film. And I think I take a lot of inspiration from sort of like Web 2.0 software that might release itself really early, release early, release often. That's what they used to say when they were creating Linux. Because if you don't release early and release often, you don't allow for that opportunity for collaboration. So how are people going to be able to improve or comment when they can't see what you're talking about yet, So yeah, there's been some instances where it might have been too early, and there might not be as much activity, or as the film isn't as far along as I might have hoped. But at the same time, that's led to a lot of interesting submissions, a lot of interesting collaborations that I'm really grateful for. I mean, even small things, like I had a guy upload a song by this really obscure Japanese band called The Plastics, and the song is called Copy Copy, and the lyrics are like, it's written in like 1979, and the lyrics go like, copy, copy, super terror, copy, wow. I was like, that is the opening of my movie. It's awesome, So even it's like little things that allows, or as a filmmaker, it's great,
What about, how do you imagine them helping you promote the movie once it's in theaters or available on DVD?
Yeah, I mean that's going to be a huge thing. And
do you think you'll sell a digital version of it, or do you want to give the digital version away for free?
That's going to be really fun because I don't know if I'm allowed to just give it away based on the partners that helped me make the film, but in some way we already are. I mean, we'll probably sell a digital copy. We're going to sell a DVD. We want it in theaters. We want it like really all over the place in as many formats as we can. We like to call it like the digital universe of this film, And I think that once the film is set for DVD release or for theatrical release, we really want to take advantage of a lot of the stuff that a lot of sort of independent narrative filmmakers have been able to do in terms of gathering an audience, say, for a theater before the release, having people kind of vote on whether or not they want this in their town beforehand. So it just makes so much sense. Theatrical documentary in Canada, especially as a Canadian filmmaker, it's like a pretty tough road to hoe, that you're going to get the critical mass in a theater to come out and see your documentary film. But a lot of these techniques really take a lot of that guesswork. Because I don't need to be in a town for 16 weeks or something, but I would love, really solid 2-week theatrical release. And if I could have some gauge of that based on, making that known to an audience that they can pre-purchase a ticket, and then if I don't come, they get their money back. These kind of techniques, I think, are just so smart, but also just viral marketing. Like we're working on open source cinema. We're trying to do a partnership with a group called iSpot, which is a remixable web-based editing, and we're doing a lot of work with mobile so that we create a community around the remixing. So if you upload Scott's Girl Talk mix and then somebody changes it, you might get a notice on your mobile that said, hey, somebody's edited your movie, and then you can actually see that on your phone. But so then can we leverage that kind of amount of participation to a theatrical release so that that person knows, hey, this film's coming to your town, or we're going to have, Girl Talk and Lawrence Leslie are going to be at the screening, or all these kind of things that we can create as value add for the theatrical experience. I think it's really the same thing that the music industry needs to do for their product, right? Like, if you can get this instantly on the web, whether you as the artist like it or not, what is your response going to be? Is it going to be to soothe everybody and just like kick and scream, or is it going to be to provide some other value-added experience that you could only get within a physicality,
Do you see other people doing projects like open source cinema, or do you imagine doing others like it after you're done with this project?
Yeah, for sure. We want to turn open source cinema into like actually a platform that other documentary filmmakers could use, because I really see it as something, especially with social documentary filmmaking, that's actually quite important. Now that we've kind of, I think the digital circle is sort of complete now, you know? We have ways to distribute it, we have ways to create it, but how does the audience get involved at this point now, really, in like a fundamental way? And I think it's sort of it's kind of an open question for cinema creators right now, especially documentary filmmakers. How are you going to allow the audience to really interact with your film beyond just the screening? And I think that you know, the more that we can provide a spectrum of that involvement from like the 1% of people, because that's what we're talking about, right? Like a very small amount of people are going to like want to download all of your footage and remix it and have all this contribution. You know, 99% of people might want to watch it, or say 10% will leave a comment, 20% will join the Facebook group, but it's a small amount that will contribute to it. But you need to provide that spectrum, I think, for your creators. And so, yes, I definitely think that this is something that people are going to be able to use.
So what's going to be the title of the first movie? And it'll be out later this year?
It's going to be called Basement Tapes, we think, and it's going to be out in early 2008. What I'm hoping for is that we kind of be able to create a documentary cinema that isn't just so focused on the end product. And I think it's really important for social documentary filmmaking as well, because we've all shot hundreds of hours that we just ends up on the cutting room floor for what? Because of it, for the basically to sacrifice of the narrative. But there's a lot of places that we can't go as filmmakers that we might want to, and I think the web allows us to do that. If we can present things in a more of a non-linear way. So, for instance, if you were watching that, why can't you just stop it and then kind of pull out everything that went into making that clip and all the references that provides? And that kind of speaks to the open source nature as well, that people should be able to see what went into it. Which also really, as a documentary filmmaker, it can be hard. Like, I didn't get my interview with the MPAA because they Googled me. And I actually had that when I was coming. I'm from Montreal, and I came down here, and the border guards were Googling me, and he was like, "What's open source cinema?" And so, similarly, I think it's harder to get like the gotcha interview when you're being this transparent. But I think there's a balance there. That's probably good,